Welcome, everyone. We are now going to see people drop in. Welcome, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to whoever is calling from different sides of the world. I know we got a lot of people joining us today, so welcome, welcome. If you want to share where you're from, you can use the chat, say hello to everyone. We should be able to get you on the chat on seeing where you're from. Yes, there we go. MI. Ooh, that's cryptic. Michigan. I don't know if that's true. MI. Maybe it was MIT. John from Germany. Hey, John. Christina from Colorado. Dirk from Cologne. Very nice to see all of you drop in. We'll give it a minute or so to have everyone connect. And then we're going to start. I am excited for this one. Yes, Denver, Oslo, Norway. Hello, Adam. Hello, Kongju. I hope I'm saying that right. From Hamburg. Good people from Serbia, Sweden, Amsterdam, Marcel. Hello, I'm in Amsterdam as well. Very nice to see you, even though we are online. Hello from US. That's pretty broad. Hello from the other side of the pond. Great to see you all joining, guys. We have a very nice guest, and well, the last people are joining us live. Few housekeeping things before we get started. As always, in the journey management webinars, as we do, there's a Q&A button down below. If you have any questions for John or me or both, just drop them in as we go. We got a lot of questions in the last few, and we weren't able to plow through all of them. So today we're gonna at least spend 15 to 20 minutes doing all the QA and follow up after the webinar. So let's see how far we can get. But maybe we should start by introducing our guest today. So with me, and I guess you are signing up to see John in action, is John Cutler. And probably a lot of you know him from his writing. I've been following him online on the internet and have been, my camera is switching, have been seeing him in different theaters online, where he was product enablement at Toast. Before that, he was at Amplitude. And there he has seen probably the most, the good, the bad, everything around product in the world, from different product leaders, from different people, from all of the good and the bad that is product, but also thinking holistically about the business is his MO. You probably have seen him write and be on his newsletter, which is called The Beautiful Mess. If you are not following that, if you are not reading that, please sign up. I think it's great. I've gotten to know John on his writing as well. And great writing means clarifying your thinking, or at least writing clarifies thinking. So John has been doing a lot of thinking. And that is also why he is here today, because journeys are just a way to align an entire company, as everyone who is in Journeyland knows that. And John has been doing that with many different frameworks, many different people, and many different ways of doing that. Today, we're going to focus on journey first, product first. We're going to come to the title in a minute. But I think the most important thing that John has been doing is giving the world the North Star framework, or at least a methodology and a way to get to that, which is kind of like rallying the whole business around something that is truly important, or at least part of the products. Anyway, there is a lot to unpack today, and I'm so much looking forward. So, John, thank you for joining me, and welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, before we truly dig in, want to set the stage a bit, as you are obviously have been in product land, so to say, which is kind of like still being in business land. I wanted to ask you, like, when I asked you customer journey in the context of a business, how would you define it? How would you think about it? Like, if I ask you, like, what is customer journey? What does it mean to you?
Well, I might not have the academically correct answer to that, but from my sort of product and systems lens, I mean, it's any progression over time and space and materials that people are making through a product surface or the general sort of ecosystem of your company. It doesn't happen just in your company. It probably happens in their lives concurrently. So I'll tend to be more philosophical about it than maybe you like. But yeah, I tend to think that there is usually some kind of direction in a journey. There's an element of time. There's an element of travel and development. And so I think that's what makes it so powerful, why you can apply it to so many different settings. You could apply it to onboarding a new team member onto your team, and you could probably apply it to a country developing clean energy over six decades. So that's what journey means to me. I'm not sure if that's the correct definition, but that's how I'm going to think about it.
I love that. And I don't think there is a correct definition. I mean, there is a way to think about it, and the definitions go from like one or two sentences to like whole books. So there is a way, but in essence, it's a way to align people on what a customer needs and the emotions and the experience people go through. So I think we're kind of like aligned on that. But you've been spending the last what, decade in product land, even before Amplitude, you were at Zendesk and Pendo. So you've been in a lot of product organizations. So that's why I thought like, let's name this episode Product First versus Journey First. And we were laughing about it in the beginning. And you were even stating it on LinkedIn today is like, people who know me know what I think about dot, dot, dot first. So maybe that's a nice segue to it, is like, it's not product first, it's not journey first, but like, what is it about these first isms that get you thinking?
Well, I mean, they're almost always helpful and almost always wrong. That's what gets to me about them. So, you imagine these things go in stages and trends over time, customer centric or product first or journey first. And the reason why I say they're useful is that each of these waves that goes through surfaces a very important and very public and very ubiquitous label to something to orient people around an idea, which is helpful. And then ultimately, over time, as people integrate that idea into how they work, it almost becomes secondary. People don't necessarily identify it as the one thing. So that's why I say that it's helpful. It's helpful, but also wears out its welcome over a particular time. And I'm speaking a lot in the product world. There's a lot of this stuff around product centricity or product first, and you imagine some companies really need to hear that. They've had a hard time imagining anything they're doing as a product, and they're stuck. And so it's helpful for them to hear these sort of very simplistic framings of things just to kickstart them. But you can see then a couple of years later, they're struggling because they believe products are the center of their universe and they've somehow forgotten customers or the journeys that they take. They've forgotten their org design necessarily, or their internal people or how they work. Yeah, so that's what sort of both I get excited, but also annoyed anytime something is blank first or blank centric, sales led product. You don't know how many, while I was in Amplitude, how many conversations I had to have about product led.
Why
And
is
then
that?
by the
Like, you would
end,
imagine that this company like is the pinnacle of product led, right? From the outside looking in.
well, yeah, no. I mean, talking to customers and internally, this is one of these sort of debated things because you could take it on many different levels. And eventually I just came up with my own definition. I said, like, product led is using design, data, and technology to create sources of sustainable, differentiated growth. Who knows if that's right? But that was the only answer I could have that I could answer to, an IKEA, a Lego, an Airbnb, an audience of designers, because they wouldn't get too mad at me, an audience of engineers, they wouldn't get too mad at me, an audience of product managers, they wouldn't get too mad at me. So I came up with the most bland, overarching, thing. So someone said, hear it again. Yeah. Using design, data, and technology to create sources of differentiated, sustainable growth that benefits your customers and your company and the people inside your company. Ah, I had to practice that. I've said that about 1,000 times. So sorry if I said it super fast.
Right. No. People are saying like it's technical, it's a mouthful, and I think that is true, right? It's like you want to rally people around this simple idea. And but if we think about like product first, in my impression is like what is happening is that we've been digitalizing or digitizing, however you want to say it, our processes over the last decade, especially in our like pre-internet companies, right? They've been around for
Yeah.
decades, like centuries. They have legacy software processes, whatever it is. Then
Yeah.
Agile came along, this idea of like, or at least a frame of like being more agile, let me put it that way. And then we had Skilled Agile as a framework. And then all of a sudden, we put the emphasis on the internal processes, which then led to a lot of organizations putting the product first, but
Yeah.
not thinking through like what it actually meant, which is more like, hey, put the user, put the customer in the heart, and then design your product suite around that and build like things of value to them. But it became like, no, the product leads, and whatever we put on the roadmap is prioritized based on what we think is best, and therefore what the data probably suggests, rather than asking your customer. So I think a lot of people will see that as being product first. Maybe that's not the right way to think about it, but that's almost like what I'm seeing in a lot of these large companies, where it can be toxic and not really liberating, which is what it's
Oh, it's
supposed to.
become an absolute problem. I mean, realistically, in my world of B2B SaaS, at least in the late, 20 teens, 2015, 2020, 22, the driving force was to add more and more products. In fact, investors would come and say that by the time you've hit this round of funding, you must have multi-product. And that became a badge of honor, in fact, to do these things. And I was in the thick of that in different companies I was in, at Zendesk and other places. And realistically, these were not products. They were packaging, they were SKUs, they were just helping your customers do some additional jobs a little better. And it became almost a meme. Everything is a product team, everyone has a product manager, everything is a product thing. And remember, I'm talking about a slice of B2B software as a service, some B2C type things. So in that atmosphere of growth, the way to get a budget was to call what you're doing a product. I always remember there was a design systems team. They're having this debate. And then one of them made a joke. They said, just let's just call what we're doing as a product to get the budget. Okay. Just let's get this over with. So you saw this incredibly blown out of proportion thinking around products that dominated a lot of that industry for a while. And as you mentioned, what got lost, I'll give you a story from Zendesk. We were adding lots of products like chat and this and things like that. And I will always remember a conversation I had with, I believe her name was Mara, but I might be wrong. She was a product manager for the one part of Zendesk, which is the agent screen. And every day, some random product would pop up on the agent screen. This is the chat. This is the analytics for this other product or whatever. And at the end of the day, you were just helping agents do their job more effectively and helping people out in the world get their problems solved more quickly and economically. And you probably had some support managers who were trying to manage their support department economically and efficiently. So the jobs were very basic, but I remember Mara always saying, oh my God, just this other thing has just popped up on the screen, making my life difficult. Like, why didn't they think about the end-to-end journey for customers across this? But that's, without getting into more details of it, I was in the thick of this particular thing. So I think I know what you mean. And I think it's very important that companies take a step back and consider what a product actually is versus packaging and pricing, and also how that relates to their positioning in the market, et cetera.
Right. So basically saying like we're using product to, I don't know, hit our goal or complete the task or use it in our lives. Like I see in the corner of my eye in the chat, like a vacuum cleaner is a product. Your website is a service. And I think you're writing something similar. Like, is it 2020 or 2008? You already started to vent about like your product is actually a service, and you think about the whole, not just as the feature
Oh
set.
yeah, I was pretty early into and talking about that because it was so obvious that it was just making for dysfunctional user experiences. Another good example of this is, think about a place like Amplitude. I was conducting workshops for customers before they even sort of purchased the product, as they were wrapping their head around this particular journey that they were taking. And I used to remind people that what I was doing is an extension of the product. In B2B SaaS, the whole company is the product. Every touch point you have is an opportunity to help your customers be more successful. That could be a customer success interaction. That could be a support interaction. That could be silly John Cutler doing a workshop with your team. It can be how you release your products. There's so many things about it. And one thing that's fascinating, you and I have spoken about this, is that many non-digital product companies are worlds ahead in terms of service design because they didn't have the the comfort blanket of selling a digital product to persuade themselves that that's all you need to do. So where you see service design evolve a lot in Europe, Northern Europe, in healthcare and other environments, were places where they were forced to already imagine that everything they were doing was an ecology of sorts, an ecosystem of sorts. And so in this weird niche of Silicon Valley and other places, this premise that all you need is a good product, that will solve all your problems. It will support itself, it will sell itself, it will evolve itself. This is just how ironic, right? I mean, those companies are actually really good at some things, but they're not very good at other things. And then meanwhile, you have these other companies that are these ecologies or these non-digital product companies that would frankly benefit from understanding some of the other practices from the other part of the world. So it's just a very interesting environment at the moment.
So what is causing this shift? Because I see the same. Like if you look
Yeah,
at the companies that we are serving, they're large, they're all over the map, literally like all over the globe. They have services, they have digital offerings, they have digital products, what we would call a
yeah,
product, whether it's an app to do something, whether it's a website or a
yeah,
portal, whatever the way we call these things today. It's like, but it is a mess, right? It is basically needing to be tangled up together, but it's not connected. So what they do is they invest in what they call service design, where there's incredibly smart people using journeys and blueprints, these kind of tools to bring it all together and then look at all the internal processes and look at all the data and starting to
yeah,
map it out. And then all of a sudden unlock like this way of working on top of that. But when you look at these pure digital companies, and we got customers like that as well,
yeah,
they seem to be struggling more, which is crazy because they're smaller. They have a suite of products sometimes, but they have simpler ways
yeah.
of working. And yet they're struggling bigger with this. Like why is that? What is causing that, do you think?
Well, it's inertia. It's money and inertia, basically. And and companies tend to solve the problems that they think are going to earn them money, and they have a lot of inertia going for them. So, I mean, I always remember it. I'm not going to name the company being there, and there was a customer facing team that couldn't get two data sources to talk to each other just to be able to help customers when they needed help. And I remember one day I just wandered over and an engineer was overhearing this problem. And I love when engineers do this too. I mean, they were observing this and they were saying, this is insanity. This will take me 4 minutes to fix. I will have something in production that will have these two systems talking. Why didn't you ask us to come and help with this critical thing? The features that I'm working on are in no way as important as this stupid problem we're having with getting two data sources to talk to each other. Data person gets there, the engineer was there, they call over a designer and say, I'm not good at this, could you help me think about this? Designer helps, they did a little bit of research. In 2 hours they had these data sources talking, and then this customer facing team was able to do their job more effectively. And to your point, you'd be amazed how often those types of problems happen in these sort of pure digital product companies. Back to your question about why: money, investors, pressure. These companies are on the up. At some point, they're going to go flat. And then they're going to start to drop down, and they're going to be disrupted by the new phase of companies coming up. The companies you're talking about have already gone through many macro cycles. A 50-year-old company has already gone through many macro cycles of transformation and reimagining what they're doing. So it's part hubris. They've just never had to tackle this problem yet. And so this is, people always imagine that their company is either the worst or the best, but it's just a matter of time before entropy catches up to everyone.
Do you think that we can call an end to all this transformation work? That because ultimately, why are these companies doing it? The way I see it is they want to work in lockstep with their customers, because
Yeah,
if the needs are changing, they want to be on top of it, right? On a big scale, on a small scale, thinking about the whole
yeah,
consumer life cycle your product might not even be part of yet, but also thinking about the things that you do influence where you have a relationship with your customer. Like for a business, it is essential to know what people are thinking and what they need next and how
right.
to give them what they want. But we're just not capable of doing it at scale. Do you see a way for these companies to like starting to be, because these stable companies, I mean, going through all these cycles, you could call them stable, right? They're still here.
Yeah.
Stock went up, their stock went down, but they're still here. People bought. companies, they merge with another, they're still here. So what are they doing differently? Or maybe like, are they just able to transform and transform and transform again? Or should we say, no, 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 no. At some point, there is this nirvana where everyone is able to walk in lockstep with customer. I mean, that's what we're vouching for sure. But are we able to get it there? Like,
Well, I mean, you always see the constraint move around. I mean, I think that that's the thing. So I always use at Amplitude, I'd ask people, are you shipping faster than you learn or learning faster than you ship? Almost to a T, when I asked that to Silicon Valley type companies, they would say we're shipping faster than we learned. Almost to a T, when I would ask this to large enterprise companies, we're learning faster than we ship. We have 150 researchers and they've accumulated enough research for us to be building for the next 30 years, yet we can't get anything built out the door. So the constraint always shifts. So the company that is shipping faster than it learns, at some point, it will amass so much debt and so much clusterfuck for its customers that then it will stop being able, it will have so much complexity to manage that they won't be able to ship as fast as they learn anymore. And then they're going to get stuck. So it's like a pendulum swinging, back and forth for these companies. But I think that this is where also people need to look for good ideas across different domains. I mean, I mentioned domain-driven design, DDD, from the sort of architecture community. There's a lot of stuff in team topologies that's happening now in socio-technical systems, in the resiliency community that's doing stuff around safety. There's stuff in service design. There's stuff in product. There's stuff in design. What tends to happen is, we were joking beforehand, is if you follow other strands or schools of thought, there's two things that are going to be guaranteed to happen. One, they will say something that pisses you off, that assumes that they are the ones who invented something. And two, if you listen long enough, you'll find something that there's overlapping interests for, that you can do things together and you can learn from them. So it's almost like the immutable truth of having these different domains, that you're going to get pissed off and you might learn something. And so that's one thing that helps. I don't know how we got there, but anyway, it's an interesting problem. The pendulum is going to swim back and forth. And many of these companies that are literally, it takes them a year to ship something. So their constraint is that they cannot build fast enough to learn fast enough. However, once they do this sort of DevOps transformation and they get these things, I mean, if you follow DevOps Enterprise Summit, for example, there's companies that went from shipping once a year to shipping once a day. Their problem is no longer that they are learning faster than they ship. The pendulum has swung back the other way. So that's a little bit something for people to think about.
So what about prioritization? Like, how is that impacting? Because if you're like unable to ship a year, or like take a year to ship something, like the prioritization cycle takes a long time. Would you say that's a good thing for a company? They can spend a lot of time planning and strategizing and coming up with the right thing? Or when the pendulum swings the other way, because everything can be prioritized and therefore basically nothing gets prioritized? Or am I getting it backwards, and is it basically the other way around?
Well, you've got the different sides of the same problem, though. Like in the Valley, people are like, well, we can just ship it in a day. Why don't we get it out there and test? So they're obviously maybe not doing enough research.
Yeah.
And these other companies that are like, it takes us a year, they're definitely doing enough research. The problem is that the research is going stale by the time they're able to deliver the thing. And so
Right.
if you think of research insights as inventory of sorts that you want to convert into value for your customers, the problem with it, the reason why being able to ship quickly is important is that if you can't, that inventory of insights will become stale and will no longer be timely. And that's problematic. So this is where you see, what happened, it seems, in a lot of the research community is they thought they'd get a seat at a table. They positioned themselves upstream. They created a big office of research, and they did an amazing job of doing that. But they accumulated more research than the company could fundamentally transfer into value. And then now the pendulum swings back and forth. So I don't have an easy answer for it, but it is an interesting balance. It's like an interesting pendulum.
The one thing I'll say is, what I have seen is that I've seen both in existing companies, but I also see is that the amount of research, the research inventory, can actually finally be put into use, because it's now like this becomes this living thing, right? Especially like with enabled by AI, where you actually can start to go through heaps amount of research. Like some companies have like 10, 20 years of like inventory of unused research lying around in many different sources. Well, if you can activate that, then a lot of that is still relevant today. Some of it obviously isn't.
Some of it. I mean, that's my thing about the AI stuff. People are like, we're going to be able to activate, our 6 years of understanding our customers. It assumes that you have the same customers that you did 6 years ago. So that's the who is it? Aaron Walters had that great talk around activating research, and they had used Evernote. Actually, this was it's called Connected UX. It's one of the best talks I think that Aaron Walters ever did from InVision when he was there, or he was at MailChimp before and then was InVision.
Yeah.
And it was just so funny because him and I chatted about it, and he was like, yeah, it worked for us, but ultimately other companies tried to copy this research inventory, and it was going stale too quickly. So yeah, it's very contextual.
Yeah,
Tom
and we all
Rashawn's
know our
Atomic
dependence on
Insights. Yeah,
Splunk for InVision at some point. I mean, that
yeah,
is also like
yeah,
what is hard about that. So the timing is
yeah,
important, but maybe like switching gears a little bit to the work you've done on the North Star framework and helping companies understand like how to think about what is important and what isn't. I mean, this is the number
yeah,
one question, right? Whether you use a journey framework, you have a layered journey framework with all your insights bubbling up to opportunities, which many of our customers have, that would help them assess and basically answer the question is like knowing what people do, knowing why they do it, and then making
yeah,
business decisions about what to do with that information and informing our priorities. Basically, inform planning, do strategy, and that's about as good as it gets. Now, then
yeah.
we go into like, okay, but how do we know that is the right thing? Are we
Right.
aligning it with our company goals? And that's, I think, a nice segue to the North Star. But it also comes back to like understanding this whole like ladder of engagement that you're talking about. So maybe we
Yeah.
can unravel that a little bit
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. I mean, look, I did hundreds of North Star workshops, and I would say that about 60 to 80% of them ended up with what we called inputs. So, you've got a North Star, which is a leading indicator of growth, and you have these inputs that feed into the North Star, and it creates this nice little beautiful tree. In reality, it's more like a flywheel in many cases. I would say that in 60 to 80% of cases, the inputs were probably steps of a journey, either stages of maturity with the product, stages of towards an aha moment, stages of socialization within their company. So, land with a small group and then it socializes across the company. So I found that very fascinating that in the majority of North Star workshops, we ended up with inputs that roughly equated to major transitions in trust, ability, um, depth of use, the ability for the product to be able to change the person's environment or how they were working or the job that they were doing. And then in B2C, which is kind of the interesting thing, bringing it back to the Valley, is that then some companies would have like breadth, depth, and frequency. And the funny thing about breadth, depth, and frequency is it doesn't tell you very much about what you're doing. So yeah, so first, what we started to do eventually, we added actually a second workshop called Ladder of Engagement.
But
Ladder
hang
of
on, like
Engagement.
just to clarify
Yeah.
for people, like breadth, depth, and frequency means different things to different products. Like,
Oh,
can you
right,
give an
right. Oh,
example
sorry.
of like,
Oh, yeah, yeah. So let's just be very specific with examples. So some companies would have an input scheme that would be like initial use, deepening knowledge of the product, another input, expert usage in the product, and then further expanding their use of the product. So those would be the inputs, and you would add measures to each of those, and different teams would work on either all or one of those inputs to drive the results you want, depending where you are. In a breadth, depth, and frequency scheme, it might be like, well, some customers use all the product, some customers go deep in one part of the product, and then they have to use it a lot. So they use our product, they deeply use our product, and they use it a lot. And the point I was trying to make is that I actually have a preference for the journey-based input schemes because that means a little bit more to me than breadth, depth, and frequency. But in B2C, a lot of times companies would adopt that type of structure for their
but
things.
this is
We'll give some
because
links
then,
to people afterwards. Yeah.
right? Because we're thinking product first, everything revolves in our product world, right? There's nothing around it. It's
Yeah.
like people are using the product and they're stuck in it, or they're not using it, or this part. So I think that
Yeah.
is also like, yeah, okay, got
Yeah.
it.
But back to this thing of this ladder of engagement. I mean, one of the classic things in product is this idea of a funnel. And the problem is the funnel is like, I used to think of it as like the meat grinder. I mean, what a bad analogy for human beings to drop them through the top of a funnel and then watch them go down to the bottom of the funnel and come out into your, my mother used to do that with her oil, to filter her oil, and she'd get the oil out the other side. Um, so we revise that as sort of a ladder of engagement, this idea that you are helping customers move up a ladder of success with your product, trust, increasing trust in what you're doing. And that each of those steps was an opportunity. Small steps in the beginning can actually be rather easy, but sometimes there are large steps and you need to use the product to help them get there. And so I was just noting with you before we were chatting how similar that is to thinking of it as a journey. But the idea of like flipping the funnel and then creating a ladder was actually revolutionary for product-y companies. They're like, why aren't we using the funnel? But if you were to say that to a bunch of service designers, they would think you're just restating the obvious and they'd laugh at you. So this is just an example of how different things are perceived in
I think
different
that this is actually
communities.
like we actually have one customer that did this quite successfully, where they had like typical funnel, sales funnel. They were seeing an increase in cancellation rates. When they flipped the funnel and layered on the journeys, they were able to like find three performance
Yep.
gaps, or basically like opportunities that were happening way earlier in the journey that actually correlated with like that conversion problem or cancellation rate increase problem.
Yeah.
They were able to uncover millions of like potential cancellations by just fixing those performance gaps or focusing on them. So
Yeah.
it might sound trivial, but if you can align your whole business around this and say like, okay, whether my anchor is the customer lifecycle model, and I'm breaking it down into stages, and those journeys that are part of those stages are actually helping me to understand, well, basically how people progress through it. You don't need a funnel. Sure, you need to
Right.
measure conversion rates, which is important. Then you know how many people went through and went to the next stage. But the funnel, yeah, I'm with you on the meat grinder. Sorry, maybe this was.
I just think it's funny how the different communities will use ideas. And anyway, keep going. We have a
No,
lot to talk
no.
about.
This is good. I'll open it up for a few questions from people, because
Oh
I see
yeah.
you got a ton. So let
Let's
the
see.
audience
Oh,
engage a little bit.
Q&A. Oh, Q&A there. We got those things.
Yeah,
You
I'll
want
take
to you
them.
want to pick them? Yeah.
Carmen is helping me on the background because there was also a lot
Nice.
in the chat going on. So let me just take one from Karen Tucker. I hope I'm saying that right. So do you have a best practice to help digital product partners, emphasis on digital product, help that there is a whole non-digital aspect of product management, like pricing, legal, packaging, marketing, that goes well beyond the digital roadmap? So best practice to help digital product partners, whoever they
Mm,
are. Do you have a
yeah. I
best
mean,
practice for that?
well, I think that some of them are the ones I mean, just here's a great example that I've seen. So again, I talk about funny things in different communities. There's this whole activity called event storming that I really like. Event storming is an activity that comes from the domain-driven design community. And it's a nice activity because it's something that I like inviting engineers to. They usually get a lot of value out of it, and designers get a lot of value, and customers get a lot of value out of it. And so the reason why I said you probably know the answer already is event storming sort of comes up with like a journey. And I just don't think you can go wrong with inviting a cross-functional group of people into an environment and mapping out what actually goes on in these things. That example I gave you earlier about the engineer who just noticed these two systems not talking together, that's just a perfect example of how it helps to do that. One thing I would say, for example, at Toast is Jihad and the design team. I mean, they are just doing such amazing work of getting journeys in front of executives from different groups, and the sort of jaw drop moments you would see when the research team would do like researching an outage, for example, like all the people that are involved, all the systems that are involved, how it manifests in a restaurant, how it manifests for the front of the house in a restaurant, the back of the house, how it manifests for our engineers who have to fix the problem, all the different dashboards that have to come out that get used to diagnose the problem, all our comms teams, the legal team. The minute there's an outage, the legal team has to get involved to understand what's going on. on and on and on. You could probably counted 25 different constituent groups of people involved with a single outage in a software as a service company that deals with restaurants. And his team's ability to kind of just do what you know to do the deep research, explain this as a journey, explain what an outage really looks like from these different perspectives, not just from customers, but from our own team members and the response teams and everyone. That just had, again, just jaw drop moments in terms of building shared understanding. So what you know already, I'll just reiterate what you know already, if you're an audience of this.
But this is it. Like everything brings it back down to the journey because it's about people. It's
Yeah,
about like how they move along in time to complete something, to do
yeah,
something, to get value, to experience a thing, and have an emotional journey as well as like interact with your digital touch points and
yeah,
maybe like your non-digital touch points, like your legal docs or like what is happening in the restaurant, which is I think a better example. But I'm like this is
yeah.
why we started Data in the first place. I was standing in one of these like big war rooms, right? Pre-COVID big room. We've done the research. We've brought all the teams together. Actually, our customers, the customers we interview, we help like validate our ideas, were standing with us in this room. The board, literally the board, this was a Fortune 500 company, board of directors, few people of the board would come in, accompanied by C-level executives, because this was the first time they did a big thing. And same thing, jaw-dropping moment. Budget, like we had like an ask for like a 300K budget to put something on the roadmap. It was like for some, it's a big thing. For them, it was a small thing. But anyway, like jaw-dropping moment when they heard the customers relaying their experience and like, if you solve this with this thing, like we're gonna be super happy. And they represented like typical persona for them. Amazing. But then on Monday, project was done. Everyone was chasing their own KPIs. We got hired by the next VP to do it all over again. Right. This was in
Oh,
our
geez.
consulting days. So it was ridiculous. And I think
Yeah.
like the journey is important. The journey is powerful. But if you then don't continue building on it, like where does it end up? Like it stays on the wall, it stays on the Miro board, it stays on the fig file. Like it is not going to live somewhere else. And
Well, I
then
think this is
all of
also the
that
thing about,
works lost.
yeah, you have to be thinking about, this is my point about the unused research in these moments. I mean, I think this is another thing too. The teams that I've met who are working on some sort of, there's a lot of B2B SaaS companies that have hired someone either on some customer experience team or some other team to do look at the journey. And they present these artifacts and they present all this research. And literally, the company is not structurally capable of harnessing the talents of engineers and designers and other folks to attack those problems. So this is just the sell. You know, the journey is just the research in a sense is just the sell to try to package this thing up to do it. And ultimately, too, those companies aren't using service design to look internally about how they work to understand how difficult it is to even work. Same thing with product companies too. They'll customers are king and they do everything, but they can't look inwards to figure out how they're working. And I think that this is the biggest the biggest challenge. You know, beyond sort of that jaw drop moment is what you do next. Anyway, I'm reiterating what you said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How would you think about that? I'm switching gears a little bit and taking a question from Dirk Zimmerman
Yeah.
on the value of aligning goals and metrics or measurements across departments, and have journeys been helpful in providing such a framework? And I think it touches based on what you said before, but like maybe you have an example for us that you can show or like help walk us through like what
Yeah.
is or is there value in aligning the goals and metrics across departments using a journey to understand what people should be
Well,
measuring
I
against?
mean, the very, very important for you to think about input versus output metrics and leading versus lagging metrics. Because often people are looking at support cases, or those things are lagging metrics. They tell you something happened wrong down the line somewhere. You know, so you have to be extremely careful. Um, you know, and I think this is the one bit of advice I would get there is what are the leading indicators, the inputs into those things happening. Um, those can have a benefit of aligning different groups. The way I tend to see OKRs or goals or metrics used in most companies is just a stupid cascade. And as things get further down, they become more abstract, more useless, more performative, more like promotion driven development. and they don't mean anything. And so ultimately, they don't have that benefit of aligning the things. Another thing that this is going to seem like a very simple thing, but there's measurement and there's metrics. And a lot of companies just downplay just measuring what happened. So they come up with these like composite metrics and CSAT and all this kind of stuff, and no one really knows what they mean. But if I was to ask, how many people failed at doing what they were trying to do yesterday? Say, oh, I don't know. And that's one thing I learned a lot at Amplitude is doing this event-based analytics. What I liked about event-based analytics, you're measuring actions in your product and how many times they happen and who did them and how you can segment those people. So be very wary of these composite metrics that are just done in average across large groups of people that aren't very actionable. I don't find that those align your organization as much as you would think. So I think in short, understand the journey, understand the actions as a human moves along that journey, understand the failure points across that journey, make sure you get coverage of measurement across that journey, and then surface the actionable inputs that teams can control. And then ultimately, I think that gives you a better shot at using this to align your company versus cascades and stupid MPS and blah, blah, all that stuff. Like it doesn't help as much as you think.
Yeah. There's one counterpoint, by the way, to everyone who is working in an organization where MPS is the most important thing that matters.
Oh, yeah.
So what I've seen, and this is quite, I mean, it's new. Like if you have your in data land, we have journeys, right? If you have your journeys, and if you're working in those journeys and you have your, let's say your epics from your roadmap or from your backlog, even align with those journeys and maybe like with opportunities in those journeys, but you do that consistently for all the journeys, different teams, different brands, different products are working on, you can put an NPS metric on top, which is measured by the typical survey, right? At the end of a purchase experience, how did we do? Like, would you recommend? Like all the basics. Anyway, but it has been consistently measured that way over time. People try to game the system, that's fine, but like it has been measured. But if you then start to bring in what you're actually shipping, what you're building, can be epics, but can also be like new content, different changes or changes in process. And all of a sudden you see that against the NPS metric doing this or this, well, then you can start to have a conversation with your teams and say, hey, you probably moved the needle here. Did you know? Or like, was that intentional? Like, did you try to build a feature that was designed to have, people come and rave about us and, our satisfaction scores went up. So I think that is one of the things that teams and people that are working in an organization that already has put an emphasis on this can apply today. But in broad strokes, like I agree on like the way you think about it, your journey. I mean, we had Maxi Schmidt from Forrester 2-3 weeks ago here, and she also said something similar. It's like many people skip this step, but like mapping out the decision-making process journey in your company is a vital thing to know. Like, why would you start a journey-centric transformation or journey work in the first place if you can't influence decisions? So where are we prioritizing? What is the way that things get like planned, and how do we design strategy? So I think what you're saying is the same. If you have the journey and understand what actually is the stopgap or what is actually happening in that journey, you can start to understand what we should be measuring in the first place. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, people become, I mean, this is things people don't realize is that companies that became good at measuring things did that by iterating on that over time and learning how to measure and learning that what they were measuring was the right thing to measure. The idea that you're going to suddenly wave a magic wand and then get a North Star thing and have perfect OKRs. And I mean, this is why I make fun of MPS, because it offers the promise of something that people gravitate to, but there's no way it delivers on that promise. And so ultimately, measurement itself is something that you need to iterate on over time. You can't go wrong, though, understanding when something happens. Like you can't go wrong understanding how people are moving through journeys and moving across things in your. So that's a good place to start. Start by counting things. And then start layering on the meaning of those metrics and experiment with the meanings and the hypothesis around what the meanings are over time. But yeah, prior life and Amplitude, but measuring things is fun.
Taking one more question before we segue into some of the other topics for today. Jens Scharnetsky is asking, should we move from the term product owner to journey owner in the future? I think another spicy topic. I'm sure you have an opinion on this. Like, what do you think? Should we? Should we not? This is a classic thing of journey first, product first as well? Like, or Do you have a more
I would
strong
just,
opinion on
I
that?
mean, oh, geez. I mean, let's just face it. A lot of product managers are not managing a product. So a terrible rule, but a fun rule to think about is only use the product manager title when someone's managing a product. And so if you're a company with 50 made up products, you don't need a product manager for each of those things. So then that leaves us the question about what should we call everyone else? Um,
So just to clarify, what you mean is like in lot of large organizations, a product owner or like when they call it a product manager, actually a
yeah.
project manager that
Well,
is
so this is
working
so
for someone
this is
else,
where we have to
not the
think
product.
historically too. Look, I have a friend and she works in shoes. And in shoes and in consumer goods, you have a product manager who has P&L responsibility for a product line, works on positioning, understands how the shoes are going to sell, how they're going to be built. They're going to get hired or fired based on the success of that particular shoe, right? Okay, so we've gotten into this crazy world of SaaS where you have capabilities, you have services, you have long-standing things, and it's just messy. And I don't have the easy answer for you. That's why I'm hesitating at this particular thing. But frankly, if I was working in a company and someone called me a capability owner, fine. If someone wants to, like, I think it's, let's skip to the next question because I'm going to have too much to say on this particular thing. But
Okay.
I think that the title thing and then saying people are real or not real, or you're a project manager, you're this or you're that, is just actually just obfuscating. It's getting in the way of the more important discussions we need to be having as companies to do
Yeah.
it. So
Yeah, but I think like there's one thing is like people want to be responsible for something. They want to be having an
great.
impact, and the wrong thing to give them a title of owner is saying like you own this, so now you make all the decisions, which is like I don't know. That never was my preference. Like that was
Yeah.
I like manager in general, like journey manager, project manager, product manager. I think that's more natural rather than an owner. Well, you can
Yeah.
still own it and be responsible for it, but okay. Segueing to the easier questions. This is a very easy one. How would you measure the customer experience, John?
Oh, that's an easy one. That's
I
good.
was kidding.
Um, well, I think we sort of touching on that before. I mean, first figure out what people are doing, really, really doing, and real human beings are doing. The number of companies that say they're measuring this stuff, but can't actually tell what a real human being is doing, and then go and find, yeah, obviously maybe anonymize them. There's PII involved, but the first step is to be able to find the stream of activities that a one single human being has done with your product. I know this seems like a weird way to answer this question, but the first way is just be able to measure it. Can you understand how a human being is transversing your products and services in different touch points to accomplish their goals? So that would be the first thing. And then, then you have to layer on sort of descriptive measurements. That's descriptive measurements, sort of what are they doing? And then you have to start considering evaluative type measures. How well are they doing those things? How successfully are they doing those things? And so again, yeah, super long question, maybe for another day. But the tip that I would give people is if you can't go to a system and see the stream of actions that a single human being did in your product, you don't have the foundation to measure the customer experience because you don't know what's happening. And so that's a good start for people.
Right. And then if we think about like expanding it
Right.
before the product, after the product, I think like have we lost the thread how human beings feel as they go across these things? Like, is that what we're basically seeing now in the world happening? That we're like with our digital tools, like every department has like dashboards, they have tooling, they have everything at their disposal to observe, to measure, but they're not connecting the dots and therefore like not doing it holistically. But in general, like product or journey, have we lost touch on like how people feel and what they experience and why they are doing what they are doing in the first place?
I mean, did we ever have? I, I I don't know. I mean, certainly there's too many. I think that the answer there is probably the proliferation of tools and the complexity of the journeys that people have across our companies are making it even more tempting to imagine that we have a God's eye view on what customers are doing and how they're feeling. And we probably are losing opportunities to connect with them on a more personal level.
The thing I like about journeys is their simplicity, right? We get a lot of questions from customers like, can you do branching? Can you do like all these like different nuance? Like when people go here, like almost designing these Sankey charts, right? Where we see like the flow of how many people go from one step to the
Yeah.
other. We're still like a bit hesitant because if we're going down that rabbit hole, what you're gonna get is you're gonna like on the individual customer, you could like go and have all these variations of journeys, and therefore you can have every journey mapped out and still have no clue what's going on. So simplifying it one level up and say like, what is the key thing people are trying to achieve? What is the goal they have? What is the task they need to complete? When you're buying a home, the smallest thing is like going online and finding out if there is even a home, or finding out who's going to be your broker, or finding like there's this tiny journey that you're doing. You're not even considering you're being part of that journey. You're just doing something, right? But for the insurance company or the bank,
Mm.
looking at it, you're part of the journey. You're doing a journey to get to a goal, and you're part of the customer experience when ultimately you choose us, but your experience starts there. But the journey is pretty straightforward when you're an insurance company. But if you're a product company, well, if you listen to Spotify, like there's not really one journey, right? You go into the app and you measure all these events, and then what is John doing? Why does he like Britney Spears today? Why he was like Metallica the other day? It's like can't make sense out of that. So my long-winded like question, or like where I'm getting at, is that the simplicity of it all is actually doing businesses a favor, I think, rather than to really understand all these like possible scenarios. Just think about the key ones where there is opportunity.
Well, I think that like anything, there's advantages of looking at the happy path and then advantages of looking at reality.
Yes.
I mean, part of the problem with a lot of companies is that the data is so messy and so complex. And here's a funny point is like Sankey diagrams, they sell analytics tools, but people don't use them nearly as much as they think they're going to use them once they start using them. So I think that one of the things you sort of need both, right? Like you need to understand when people are going off the happy path. At the same time, though, if the tools you use just drown you in a layer of complexity, and if you can't, we would do this activity at Amplitude where people thought they had to instrument, 1,000 events or 2,000 events. And, it would be like a car rental app. And you'd say, I don't know, when does a person get happy? When they drive out of the car lot successfully. Okay, how often did that happen yesterday? Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure how that's happening, but you have this, and these things. So what we tended to find in Amplitude is that, people imagine that if they just instrumented every event, that would give them a lot of wisdom. And then in doing so, they would miss the couple key value exchanging actions that they had, and they would miss the forest through the trees. So I think that ultimately, though, I think it brings up the question is that if you're a designer and you're seduced by the simplicity of these things, it would probably be beneficial for you to see the real world about how people use products. And then at the same time, as if you're drowning in the complexity about how people use these particular products, it would probably benefit you to step back and understand what those key parts of the journey are.
Right. Just to clarify, there's a question, what is a Sankey journey or a Sankey chart?
A Sankey is a type of chart that displays basically the various journeys starting from one fixed point or one fixed endpoint, and all the journeys that extend beyond that point. And if you'll Google it, you'll see these pictures. Interestingly, there's a cultural element to it. And in Japan, if you look at traditional Japanese art, you'll notice that they kind of look like Sankey diagrams. And one thing that's super fascinating is that often in the United States, when people see a Sankey diagram, they get really nervous. Like, I can't handle that. That's not simple. I don't like it. But if you go to Japan and you show people a Sankey diagram, there is a certain level of, there's a cultural element to understanding the flow of things in this way, and they actually are less nervous about Sankey diagrams. I didn't know about that until a couple of years ago, which is a very fascinating cultural element of data visualization.
I love that. So what should we see? So like Japanese art,
Art.
Is that,
I don't know if
are we
that,
done? Is that what we did?
no, you
Like
probably
these
just
kind of
want to look
things?
at Japanese art. I don't, yeah, let's, maybe this Google image exercise will not work the way we're
No.
expecting it. But yeah, just Google Japanese art and you'll see what I'm saying.
That's awesome. Like I didn't know that. I knew what Sankey charts were, but this is phenomenal. Nice. Thanks for this lovely segue. All right, last question for today, I think. Um, for Melissa Miller, very timely. Thank you, Melissa. How do you convince, I don't know if convincing is the right word, but let's go with it. How do you convince a product-centered organization to consider taking a journey-based approach? Any advice for aligning different product owners, teams across a single journey?
Well, I can just say what I've seen work, and then I don't know if this is the thing, but um, often, so for example, in the product world, often there's a growth team. And the interesting thing about the growth team, other than maybe we could disagree with some of their goals or tactics in some sense, often what the growth team does is take it as to their responsibility to get a more end-to-end view. So they'll tend to incorporate stuff that relates to the marketing funnel, and they'll understand, they tend to invest a fair amount of energy and instrumentation and understanding how people use across the product to different things. And so one thing I've noticed is that often the growth team becomes, because of their investment in those particular things, they actually become a de facto uniter for different people thinking about the journey. So that's one. Number two, consider using a customer health score or some kind of customer health thing that incorporates different inputs from across the journey. So when we did the North Star workshop, people would, so for example, at Amplitude, our North Star was weekly learning users. Now that doesn't sound all that interesting, but when you looked at the inputs, we had one input called activated accounts, which was our ability to get data into the system and get the customer getting their first charts. Then we had something called broadcasted learnings, which was, I create a chart and I give it to Jochem and I'm saying, hey, I'm broadcasting a learning to you. And then we had consumption of learnings, which was the long tail journey of that insight as it helped the team create decisions for months and years to come. Our North Star weekly learning users was basically, the number of customers that broadcasted a learning that was consumed by one or more users in that period of time. The reason why I'm saying all these specific details is that has a uniting effect, because you couldn't move the North Star metric unless you could activate the accounts, unless you could encourage the content creators essentially to create the insights, and that the consumption that those insights, if I just send a dashboard, you don't know how many dashboards in the world are never looked at again. But at Amplitude, that didn't count for our North Star. You had to consume the learnings. So in a sense, our North Star was the journey from raw data through insight sharing, through insight consumption. And that had the element of really, really uniting the team around a journey-centric idea. So that's another thing that you could try at your company. It's a long topic, and we could talk for a long time about this, but that might also have an element. So back to like Zendesk, for example, I mentioned this agent experience. As all these products began to proliferate, something we probably could have done was, regardless of the channel, we could have probably measured a channel agnostic journey from a human's problem out in the world with a product through to effective resolution of that thing, using more than just very basic customer support type metrics. Like we could have understood more better the friction that existed. And then you could have pivoted that by different channels, chat, voice, etc. But that would have had a uniting effect for our teams to know that you can't just go rogue on your product and then expect everything is going to work for other people. You could do that as well.
I love that. I think these are two very good examples. I hope they help you as well, Melissa. John, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I know in the chat there's a lot of banter on like one more question,
What's
but
Tom Wilson's question?
yeah, I'm gonna say it out loud. I'll just butcher it a little bit, but like maybe you wanna do it. When will you claim out loud that you are secretly an experienced service designer in a product management suit? Will you?
uh,
Will you not?
I don't know. I don't like labels. I'll be a dirty service designing PM. There you go.
I'll go with that. I think you're right. Like labels are making it harder for people to adopt this because what you're actually sharing in your last examples is also true. It's like if you truly want to shift a product-centric organization to a journey-centric one, it's like don't scare them away with journey centricity. Just do it and let them see that all the work that you're doing in the context of the journey just makes so much more sense on whatever level you're doing it. And then people start to look into these journeys as a way to prioritize and understand and relate. And all of a sudden, you have created a journey-centric organization. And then we can label it. But I think that is,
Yeah.
especially in those
Yeah.
product-first organizations, this is the way that you want to go forward.
Well, they're really cocky too about how they work too, so that's going to be problematic for them. But in general, yeah, lead with the way, not lead with the why, not the way, and that usually is at least keeps you sane.
I love it. Thanks, John. Thanks for being with us. There's more questions. We'll see if we can wrap up a few post webinar and send it back to people. The recording will be available. Thank you, everyone, for joining from
Yep.
all over the world.
Thank you so
This was
much.
phenomenal. And see you guys later for another episode in Journey Management.
Yep. See you. Bye.